In this video, quick and tips for electricians made, I would like to cover the small boat starters. How do they work and what are you required to do for them to work properly? Also on RAST, I'm going to give you a quick tip that can save you several hours of troubleshooting. Water heaters, I know they are simple, but you know what? Even some of my guys did not understand them, so I decided to cover this video. Finally, rectifiers. Do they produce AC? I was surprised to see that and I made a little lab for you. And finally, never use rubber tape for weather deck repairs. What should you use? Vulcanizing tape. Before we continue, remember, if you find the material in this video too technical, please watch earlier videos where I cover basic electrical knowledge. Keep in mind that the first 28 videos are best understood if you follow their sequential order. Now, back to our video. Now let's talk about how to troubleshoot the electrical starter for the small RHIB boat. First, let's see how the starter actually works by looking at this cutout picture of a starter. Clearly you can see that there is a DC motor and over here are the brushers. It might be a universal motor, I actually haven't checked. But what is important is that this lever over here, or this, once it gets activated, look what happens. It comes out and the whole purpose is for this pinion to be able to come out, but then also the solenoid on top of it, it makes some electrical connections. Now let's look at the electrical connections. Here we got the electrical view of the same starter that we were just looking at. To one side we start with the battery and the starter is all the way right here to the bottom right. The starter switch is not turned on yet, but because some of the wires are connected to the battery, they will be energized according to the pose of the battery that they're connected to. Let's trace these polarizations right now. Starting with the positive pose, you will see that all of those cables will be energized. Now let's look at the negative. Those cables will be energized. Now keep in mind that the motor itself, it's like a big short because this is the biggest piece of wire. So because of that, this other piece of wire will be energized, as you can see. Now let's turn the switch on and see what happens. First, you will notice that the pulling coil gets energized. And then what that will cause is, it will cause the plunger to go in, as you can see. Now there is another coil over here called the holding coil. That will be energized. It is important for that to happen because the pull coil will be de-energized. Let's check this out. So if you notice over here, now this at the end of the plunger, there is this contact that it put the negative potential on the cable that it was red. So now the motor will be energized and it will start rotating. However, the pulling coil will be de-energized. But the whole coil will be maintained there for as long as the starter button is is kept in the start position. The holding coil will be energized, holding the plunger. Now let's talk about troubleshooting. What happens if you were to try to press the starter and you hear it's a clicking noise, but nothing starts? What could be the problem? Well, simply it could be that either the coil for the motor is burned or the battery just doesn't have enough power to be able to turn the motor. Now, I am saying all of this assuming, or the assumption is that all connections are tied and that proper power is being delivered to all three posts within the starter. And what I mean by all three posts is because on the starter you will have three connections. As you can see here in this schematic, you will be able to find those 3 points on any starter that you will be dealing with. It is very important that all the posts at the battery and at the starter be well tight and clean so that proper current can flow from the battery to the starter. So I'm on top of the boat, and the first tip is whenever you're working on the batteries, make sure that you remove this little thing so you can actually move this whole thing. It makes life much easier to work. Now that I have easy access to the batteries, I can easily just simply reach and make sure. First, I want to mention that the posts, they have a coat of anti-seize The connections are very clean and they are very tight, and the anti-seize is to prevent seawater from getting into there, or seawater air. These connections over here are for charging the battery, because the new RHIB boats, they have their own onboard charger. If these connections are loose or they are tight but they are dirty inside there because you forgot to put the chemical, what's going to happen is that you will not be able to start a RHIB. It could happen that you will not be able to start a RHIB because you are going to have a great voltage drop across the post, and the battery and the motor will not receive the adequate amount of current for it to be able to start. Like I said, good connections are very important. To do that, you actually need to undo the connections, lift them up, and then clean the eye of the cable connector with a wire brush. Also use the same wire brush to clean the battery post. Then after that, you connect it back on and you use the proper size wrench to actually tighten them down. The stop, run, and the start switch. Whenever it's on the start is when the starter gets engaged, and obviously this disconnect switch, which is in the schematic, has to be in the up position. What's in the back of the disconnect switch is very important that those, as you can see, the connections are here, and they also had the anti-seize to protect them from corrosion. So without getting too much into it, you can see the engine there, and from here, from one of the sides, down here at the bottom, you can see the starter itself, okay, which is that black motor over there, and then you can see the three connections, well, at least we can see two of the three connections there. That one over there is the actual charger for the battery, and as long as it's being provided with 110 volts from the short or the ship, it will be charging the battery. If you ever got to do troubleshooting on the miscellaneous circuits, be aware that we got terminal boards over here, which they are usually labeled along with all the switches for you to be able to troubleshoot. But like what I'm concentrating on right now is to be able to start the engine in case the starter doesn't start. If your ship has a helo recovery system, you already know that the transversing unit that I got circled, it receives all its electrical signals via one cable that has 20 independent single conductor cables. If that cable gets damaged, you will either have permanent or worse, intermittent problems that come and go. Bottom line, before you start signal tracing and opening controllers, check the cable, because the problem could be in the cable. Definitely, our cable it's got some serious issues. Unfortunately for us, we were checking. We have multiple issues, and it turns out our cable is damaged. So different shorts are happening, and we got intermittent problems due to this. Turns out that the cable was disconnected. Here we got a schematic for the hot water heater, and it is a random hot water heater, but the idea or the concepts that I'm going to talk about, you can apply it to any hot water heaters. All hot water heaters, no matter how big they are, obviously they got water goes in cold, it comes out hot because there is a heater in there, or multiple heaters that will heat up the water, and then also you will have a range temperature switch and a high limit temperature switch or safety switch, and then a low water cutoff flow switch. In here, it looks like the heater is above of the cutoff switch for low water, but that actually is not the case. The way how it's actually done is you have a hot water heater, and then the flow switch is usually located above that. So if in case water gets below that, the switch closes and de-energizes the heater. Or opens. This one over here, and this is schematic, the low cutoff switch is normally closed, and if all of this is energized, it will energize the set of contact over here, which will close. Well, this is the coil, and this is the contacts over here. When the contacts are closed, the hot water heater energizes. Now, if we pay attention, everything is in series. So if that one opens, or this one opens, or that one opens, no matter what, the contactor will drop out and stop heating the water. Now, to keep in mind, I did say that there is a thermostat control switch. This is the range. So in here, I'm saying like this one over here, for example, will turn on or will close at 125 and it will drop out at 132. And if in case this one, it failed to open at 132 and it stays closed because it fails, then at that point on is when the high limit switch temperature will open, and that's just for safety over there to prevent that it gets hotter than what it's supposed to be. But like I said, you don't have to have this schematic. Most of all the hot water heaters that I ever dealt with, they really work in a schematic, something similar to this. The only ones that get complicated is when they throw electronics, and I don't understand why they do that. Now, whenever they add electronic circuits to this, it's kind of silly because the heart of all the operation, it will always be a low cutoff water switch, a range thermostatic switch, and a safety switch. And if those three are energized, then they should energize the contactor. There is no need for a computer to just analyze that information, because, I mean, really is an overkill. So here we got our sanitizing sink. As you can see, our sanitizing sink, the minimum temperature is 171. And if we want to know the temperature of the actual tank, we just got to look at that gauge. If we look at this gauge down here, this gauge over here is to let me know what's the temperature inside of the booster heater. By the way, this is the booster heater. Now, if you see in the back, that one is water going into the booster heater, and this one is water coming out of the booster heater. If you look over here, that's what you have. Water coming out of the booster heater and water going into the booster heater. If you pay attention, I'm gonna turn off the switch and I'm gonna turn it on. You can hear the contactor energized, and that's what you want. If the contactor comes on, that means the system is working. Now, in a moment, I'm gonna show you the actual three heaters that are inside here. Very important, this light over here should be off. If it's on, that means you don't have enough water over here, and that could lead to you to burn out the heaters. Inside here, there is a temperature thermostat, and there is another temperature thermostat over here, and this is the high temp. Okay, well, it's actually inside there. In there, what I'm showing you is where this mega probe used to be at, and inside there you can put a tweaker screwdriver, and if you go clockwise, you can actually increase the temperature of the high temp, and then if you go counterclockwise, you obviously decrease it. If in case it's not heating enough, you're gonna have to adjust either this one over here, make sure that this one has the proper setting, which for our tech manual says 182, and this one over here also has to be above 200. So, and that way, the unit will not trip off too soon, and it will not get, it will fail to get to the right temperature. So when we open inside of it, well, first we got three hot water heaters over here, and that over there, well, you see that capillary, it goes inside the tank. That is the sensor, and this over here is a thermostatic switch. This one happens to be the high temp switch for this unit, and this capillary over here is actually for that gauge that you see over there. Now the range thermostatic switch is actually on the side, which I'm not gonna open, but I'm gonna. So to be able to take a hot shower or to get hot water on your sink, here we got a typical example of how a water tank looks like on board a ship. As you can see over here, cold water goes in. That's why it doesn't need any insulation inside of it. It gets hot, it comes out. Obviously, you can see they got insulation because water is pretty hot when it comes out. As a matter of fact, this one over here, that water is coming out at 144 degrees right now. The pressure inside there is, it looks like about 80, and we got a pressure relief valve over here. So if for some reason water, the pressure is too high, then you know water will just drain out the drain. Now, but what we're here to talk about is our
limit switches. Well, this is a high temp limit switch over here, and then this is the range limit switch. Well, I need to say inside the tank there are some big heaters, and the heaters are controlled, well, obviously from the thermostats via this, and energize that gigantic contactor that you see right there. And currently I got a high temp light. What that means is that the high over temp switch, that one over there, this is safety. It's saying that this guy didn't do his job. This one allowed it to get too hot, and therefore that one went ahead and opened the system. What is the job of this one over here? This is the range temperature switch. So this one, I know from the tech manual, it's supposed to be regulated between -10 to +10 or whatever the setting is at. So if this one is set up at 130, it should drop out at 140, that's +10, and then it should kick in at 120. Now over here, somebody's been adjusting it, and obviously it should be set up, like I said, all the way here, but the fact that the high temp switches are already engaged, that let me know that this guy is not doing his job.
A few days ago, I was troubleshooting a system where a solenoid required to be energized via a rectifier. And by mistake, I went ahead and I took the output and I read AC. And even though 110 volts were coming into the rectifier, I saw 47 volts over here. At the moment, I thought like maybe that was not a good reading. But then as I give it more thought about it, I thought that, hey, you know what, I'm just getting the RMS or the pulsating signal that I got over here. But anyway, that led into an experiment that I want to show you guys. And so I got 3 multimeters. The first one is going to be reading the input going into a rectifier. The second one is going to be, the second and third one, they're going to read the output going or coming out the rectifier. And as you notice, multimeter 2 is going to be set up for AC. Multimeter 3 is going to set up for DC. Typically, we should just simply be able to should be concerned about AC going in and DC coming out of it. But this is what I want to focus on, just to because when I saw that I was getting AC in this side of it, immediately I thought that the rectifier was leaky, it was bad, but now I know there's definitely not, and that's why I went ahead and this setup. And what I mean this setup is this setup that I got here. Okay, so I got my 3 multimeters. I'm using, oh, by the way, the load that I was trying to power in that system was an inductor, so therefore I chose an inductor over here, and I'm using one of these boxes used for windshield wipers. Some of you will recognize if you've been in the ship or if you've seen my video for windshield wipers. And important thing over here is that it does have a rectifier, and I'm trying to get my focus over there. This is a rectifier over here. And also I'm going to have a variable resistive inductor, which is this over here, and that is what this is supposed to represent here. So that's my variable resistor inductor. So even though I'm going to be 110 over here, the voltage over here are going to be ranging from 50 to 70 volts. All right, let's begin. So here, energizing. And I got 50 here and 22 and 42. So typically we're just concerned about these ones, but the rectifier is working just fine, and we still get, like I said, some RMS pulsating in the multimeter number 2. So now I went ahead and changed it, and you see I'm providing 76 volts going into it, but I'm only getting well, 64 over here and 32 over here. So pretty much what I want to share is that if you ever make the mistake to read the output of a rectifier with AC, like I did, and you see some voltage coming out of it, AC, that doesn't mean that the rectifier is bad. Actually, the rectifier is working good. And that's what I wanted to share. And just to double check now, I make sure that I went ahead and disconnected the load. So now the load is no longer there. But nonetheless, it only affected the voltages. So before the maximum that I was putting out was 70 something volts. Now it's all the way to 83. But it's still, though, we got the same pattern. Although, you know what? Without the inductor load, I just noticed that the AC voltage is not as high as when the inductive load was added to it. So I'm going to try to add it right now. And there. This is vulcanizing tape. I was introduced to it by the shipside ETs, and they use it all the time. They say that it's best to put electrical tape on top of it just to protect it, and it will hold. What I discovered about this tape is that even the exposure to sun, it just doesn't melt, and that's what I like it better than electrical than rubber tape. So now I'm going to show you an example of a repair that I did 3 months ago with this tape, and how it had held all this time, is still being exposed to the sun. I need to disclaim that what I'm about to show you is not an approved NAFC repair. However, at the time I had to do a repair, and it was supposed to be a temporary repair, but the truth is, and I'm not so proud of it, it's been about 3 months like this. And look, this tape is holding really well. This vulcanizing tape is much better than the rubber tape that we use.
This is an example of how to properly do a topside weatherproofing. So it has one base layer of the insulating tape.
This vulcanizing tape.
Then it has one layer of electrical tape, which goes a little bit past the end of the insulating tape, just for extended protection.
Ideally 2 inches, right?
Ideally 2 inches.
Okay.
And then on top of that is the insulation varnish, which
what this
causes a waterproof seal, so that way the electrical tape doesn't get damaged. It also creates a secondary heat layer for the insulating tape.
Okay, good. Thank you.